Hey guys, Break here, and today I wanted to talk to you about the gems that came out in patch 7.3 and why I think Blizzard kind of messed up with these. Now you guys know I love professions. I make most of my gold through professions. I do a ton of videos on professions, especially Jewelcrafting, and I absolutely loved how Jewelcrafting was working at the start of the expansion with the Blood of Sargeras you need for the gems, and then this whole Saber's Eye thing, which you actually need to get a load of stuff to make the Saber's Eye. I thought they kind of made the gems interesting again, rather than just being super boring, and that was great. So patch 7.3 launched, and obviously I'm super excited with all the new profession stuff that they included. Now what I do want to say is awesome that Blizz are actually putting improvements to professions, you know, new types of gem, even new materials like new herbs, new ore into the game, like during a expansion, instead of just every expansion changing it up. I think that's really cool. It's a great kind of boost to profession makers, because as we all know, professions generally start off really well at the start of the expansion, then just keep getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and then by the end of the expansion, or even like the last 6 months of the expansion, they hardly make you anything, and they're kind of irrelevant because everyone has all the stuff. New gear is less easy to come by, and generally people just don't bother gemming their stuff, because I mean, you know, you're not progressing on raids or anything, you're just kind of doing nothing. Everyone's completed the content. At least that's what happened the last few expansions. So for them to upgrade professions halfway through, it just kind of gives them a new lease of life, which I think is so good. I also love the crowns, by the way. I know a few people have been complaining about the crowns, and again, I think they could have done a slightly better job, but realistically, they have so many things you needed to make them, including Primal Sargerite, and obviously they have the ranks, rank 1, 2, and 3. It does give you a lot of options. Not many people are making them because they're quite expensive, so that means there's less competition. Obviously, they have the different enchants of the fever flare, whatever, so you can price things differently. It just adds a whole new level of depth to the profession, which I think is great. Jewelcrafting has always been about the gems, obviously, so it's nice that they've added a tiny bit of gear as well. I don't think Jewelcrafting needed it, to be honest, because it already has gems, necks, rings, and mass prospecting, all of which are usually pretty profitable, so probably didn't need it, but I'm not complaining because my main has Jewelcrafting. And I've sold some crowns with good stats for quite a lot. In fact, I sold one crown for over 100k last week, which was really cool. I didn't even put it for 100k. My TSM just priced it really high because there were none on the auction house with that stat, and it sold, so that was a bit of a surprise. So there we go. You can't call this a complete ranty video because I'm really impressed with the expansion, with professions this expansion, and with Jewelcrafting 7.3, apart from the main bit of Jewelcrafting that was added, and I think this was just a terrible design decision by Blizzard. I'll explain to you, but you guys probably know what I'm talking about. It's just these gems, the Argolite, Shemmarine, Lightsphene, Labradorite. They're just the 200 stat gems, so people are replacing their Deadly Eye, Masterful Shadow Ruby, whatever. So, by the way, guys, people are still buying Masterful Shadow Rubies because they're just cheaper. They're cheaper to make, and they're only 50 stat difference. So unless most people obviously go for the 200, but some people also go for the 150. So don't ignore those. But yeah, the problem with these gems is that they require nothing to make. As in, anyone with Jewelcrafting can just pick up a Lightsphene, turn it into a quick Lightsphene once they've done the quest, and most people have done the quest. They're not exactly hard to do, and that means there's just tons and tons of these on the auction house. The difference is the old 150 stat gems required a Blood of Sargeras, and what did this do? It meant that your alts had big decisions to make. If they wanted to go and craft these, they'd have to go out and farm the bloods. It meant that your main, again, what are you going to spend the bloods on? Are you going to buy like order resources? Am I going to spend it on my enchanting, or am I going to spend it on cutting gems? And you'd have to look, see what the prices were like, see what value you were getting for your blood, and it just adds a bit of depth. You know, dawn lights are going for 470, quick dawn lights are going for 570, so that's just 100 gold value per blood. You look at masterful shadow rubies, they're going for 1,400, and the shadow rubies going for 1,200, so that's like 200 gold per blood. You guys get the picture. You can work out the value of bloods pretty easily, and it also meant that there were a limited supply, because let's be honest, people do not have unlimited numbers of bloods. Unless you're on a main and you literally never spend the bloods on anything, then I know some people can get up to like 1,000. I had around 500 for a while on my main, when I used to have inscription, which doesn't really require bloods. But in general, people are not absolutely spamming the auction house with the cut gems, because it does require something which you can't just buy from the auction house. You actually have to go and farm it. Now, I don't know if you guys are thinking I might be a hypocrite, because on my streams especially, I always complain about Blood of Sargeras. I find it very annoying how your alts have to have professions, obviously, because you can only have 2 professions on your main. And then, obviously, your alts can't make quite a few things unless they physically go out and farm bloods, do some heroics, do the world quests. But I've always said I never minded the Blood of Sargeras. I just think it should be bind on account, obviously, because you can't buy it on the auction house. And most things you can't buy on the auction house now. Well, not most things, but quite a few things are bind on account. You look at the order resources which you actually buy with bloods. You can share those across your account. So why can't Blood of Sargeras be across account? That's always been my issue with it. But I think as a item and as a use, it's extremely good for the game. It limits supply, it helps the gems keep their value, and it adds a layer of depth. And one example of this layer of depth, do you guys remember? It probably still happens, but especially at the start of the expansion, people would say, like, want to buy bloods in trade chat. And then a lot of you are saying, hey, you can't buy bloods, they're bind on pickup. What do you mean? But what people meant was, I want you to get jewel crafting at level 1. If you don't have a profession that you use, I then want you to just go and craft all of these once you've unlocked the initial quests. Basically, it was generally for people who didn't have the Saber's Eyes, so they weren't 800 jewel crafting, they were like 700 jewel crafting, and so they didn't have a great use of the bloods, and they didn't have much gold, so they couldn't go and buy the Shadow Ruby to turn into Masterful Shadow Ruby, and they'd just be really lazy and they'd just sell you their bloods. So you'd say, buying Blood of Sargeras, 200 gold was for me, so you'd go give this person your 1 Shadow Ruby, you give them the 200 gold, and they would cut it into a Masterful Shadow Ruby. So in theory, you would buy their blood. Then obviously they'd trade you the Masterful Shadow Ruby back. I never actually bothered with any of this, I just kind of farmed the bloods myself, but I know lots of people did. It's Skits, if you guys know that YouTuber, he loves his jewel crafting, and I've seen some of his streams when he's been doing this, so, and he made a killing from it, and I know lots of other people did as well. But whether you choose to do something like that or not, it does add a layer of depth, you know, adds some interaction with the players, makes it kind of more community-based profession, which I think professions should always be more community-based in an MMO. They shouldn't be such single-player, which they have sadly turned into. Because we are now in the middle of the expansion, lots of jewel crafters has already done their initial quests, as well, almost all of them had, and the only thing stopping them from absolutely flooding the market with gems was because of the Blood of Sargeras. The new gems don't require bloods. I thought they might require Primal Sargerite, but they don't even require that. So what does this mean? It means anyone can just go cut a Light Sphere into a quick Light Sphere, put it on the auction house, and I mean, there you go. Look, there are 42 Light Sphere on the auction house and 61 quick Light Sphere. So it's actually more cut gems than uncut. Now let's look at the prices. The Light Sphere is 2,100. The quick Light Sphere is 1,800, 1,900. So you actually lose gold by cutting it. Why is this? It's because there's so much supply, because it's so easy to make them. There's not too much demand, like I say, because these are still selling well. And obviously the new raid's not out yet, so maybe that will help things. But I somehow doubt it, because so many people can just use their 12 Shemmarine they got from Mass Prospecting, or they just bought from the auction house. And look, I'm just going to create, I'm going to go make a ton of Deadly Deep Shemmarine. So you guys get the picture. I shouldn't have done that because I just lost gold, because apparently you lose gold cutting gems, at least on my server. But this isn't just on my server, guys, because on the stream loads of you have been saying the same kind of thing. So it's a shame, it's a real shame. I just wish Blizzard had done something. I mean, where are the Primal Sargerites here? I got 57. There's hardly anything to use Primal Sargerite on. Loads of people in my stream tell me how they've got hundreds of Primal Sargerites in their bags with not much to spend them on, and if they do spend them on Sunny, it just loses them gold. So I think Blizz kind of messed up the jewel crafting here, especially these cut gems. I just wish they required something. Requiring a Primal Sargerite would make sense, you know. Primal Sargerite's the new blood of Sargeras. These required a blood, so why don't these require a primal? That would limit the supply, it would make them more valuable, it would stop people just spamming the market with it, and it would actually increase profit margins, at least at certain times of the day. And then you could look on, say, under my journal, when are the prices high, obviously they get higher, perhaps there's less people around with the Primal Sargerites, so that would add a layer of depth. You can see when they're at the most expensive, you can start buying and selling. Obviously you can do that now, but the margins are just never really there, because it's so simple. It's just one uncut equals one cut. So that is about it, guys. Just kind of wanted to give my opinion on the new gems and how Blizzard probably should have done them to make them a bit more valuable and more interesting. That's just my opinion, though. Let me know what you think. I'm sure you guys will. Let me know if you've been making a killing from the gems anyway. I very much doubt you still are. Maybe in the first week or two, but I'm talking about in the long term. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone for subscribing. We just hit 10k, which is awesome. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, see ya.